The episode begins with Sybil activating her waypoint stone. Standing in a small circle in Oubliette's garden, headquarters of the Clan of Cups, she stands in a small circle with Zorn, the Bastion monk, her small ice Rookling defender and friend, and the even smaller, spherical Rookrot Rookling that they rescued. She stands, looks at all of them, and says, "We don't know what we'll be going into, what element this Castle Revolving is going to be throwing at us. It's a maze, it's difficult, but I know we can do it." All of them look and nod, and Sybil activates her waypoint stone, transporting them immediately out of the city of Oubliette and into one of the rooms with the waypoint stones in Castle Revolving. As a reminder, Sybil has found 3 of the waypoint stones. 4 are needed in order to triangulate a path to the center of this major labyrinth Castle Revolving. When the group arrives in the castle itself, they find themselves in a strange room, familiar to them because of the waypoint stone in the center. It is one of the rare rooms in this castle where the walls are constantly changing, the floors, the ceilings, every surface is liable at any moment to just start shifting and turning, and entire rooms will change configurations. Elements will be changed in what is presented to you in any given room. They stand there looking around and find themselves in a totally different type of Castle Revolving. The walls are all illusions. It looks like there are false paths and things like that all over the place. They begin to run through and find a pool that is giving off an illusion of another room somewhere in the Castle Revolving. Looking into it, they see in this other room an orrery, an observatory that spans upward towards an open ceiling. So, braving it, they jump into the pool and find themselves in a maze to get to this orrery. The maze continues, and they find another adventurer who'd been stuck here. Together, they make their way to the orrery and begin climbing up to the top of it, knowing that they've been in here for a while now and that a revolution could come at any moment. When they reach a certain point, the pool of illusions that they came through into this maze begins to flood the room. The water is it real? Is it an illusion? They have no idea. They just start climbing faster, trying to get to the top. And when they reach the top, there is a locked door. And when they go to attempt to pick the lock, Sybil is panicking. She's trying to open it as fast as she can. The other stranger is just grateful to be close to people and see if they have a way out. All of a sudden, the castle revolves. Next thing they know, the orrery is gone and they are standing in a room full of force fields. The walls have turned invisible. There are certain sections where you don't know it. You just walk right in to a solid surface invisible to the naked eye. They begin looking around again. They have made progress, but all of that progress is gone because the revolution of the castle makes it impossible to know where you just came from. Now they're in a puzzle across a bottomless pit, made even more difficult by these invisible force fields, forcing them to go ways they're not sure if they're going to step into a bottomless pit or if there's a force field there for them to step on. They continue and eventually find a library, which helps them discern surfaces that may be real and may be invisible force fields. They begin using new techniques, scratching surfaces, throwing chalk dust, things like this to find these invisible force field walls, and they start to make progress, but they are confronted by a rook in a gauntlet room. The force fields begin moving around. They need to not only be dodging and making their way around these invisible walls that are just starting to come from all sorts of directions, closing in on them, lifting them up off the ground, pushing down on them from above. They are also fighting a rook at the same time. However, Sybil quickly realizes that this rook also does not know where these force fields are coming from, and she starts to use its gigantic size to lure it around the battlefield, and it gets pushed around, and she finds that her weapon, her spectral spear, can cut through these force fields, and she manages to take the rook out without a problem. Just as they complete defeating this rook in this force field gauntlet, they begin making their way towards the next room, but unfortunately another revolution. When the revolution stops, they find themselves feeling very light, and they find themselves in a low gravity environment, different than the very first time we got here. Now, Sybil laughs. All of the Rooklings are enjoying themselves as she is jumping and enjoying the almost weightless feeling of it all. Then she quickly realizes that this is not necessarily going to make traversing here easy. As they begin making their way through the low gravity environment of Castle Revolving, she's trying to figure out where could potentially the center of this castle be when she finds a bastion standing in a room on the ceiling, directly on top of a circular door in the ceiling in this low gravity environment. Looking around the room, it is a tall, narrow room where she can jump from wall to wall to places where she can hold on or get a foothold, and she can make her way up to that door, but she needs to fight past the bastion in order to do it. Together with her friends, they manage to take out the bastion with minimal wounds and open the door through the ceiling, which brings them into a garden that is floating in the middle of this room because the low gravity environment has caused the water and the plants to begin floating. It's almost like an entire room that is filled with droplets of water and plants. And as Sybil and her friends are trying to traverse their way across a bridge in this low gravity environment, they see the next room with the next waypoint. They begin making their way towards it, but surprisingly the low gravity environment means that they cannot move very quickly, and then they feel it. They hear it in the walls. It starts to revolve again. They are running out of time, but they see the waypoint right there through that small opening in the wall, and they're making their way towards it. They dive and make their way through as the revolution finishes. All of them are there, and they're standing before the final waypoint. Activating it, Sybil now has a full 3D map of the Castle Revolving and knows where it is she needs to go to reach the center. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Colossal Dungeons here on the Rene Plays Games podcast. This is probably towards the end of our Colossal Dungeons series coming up very shortly. Welcome to February, everyone. We made it through the first month of the year, and I have been so busy. I don't know about the rest of you. Here in New England, we've had incredibly cold weather, bunch of snow, and somehow I have had more episodes and more things to do than ever. I thought winters were supposed to be cozy and comfy and lazy, but apparently not. But let's talk about the month of February. It's going to be another busy one. We have our 2 episodes of Colossal. I don't know if the second episode in February will be the finale or not. We will see how that goes. If not, it will not be very many more episodes beyond that. We have an interview with Ian from Undercommon Taste, who I met and played in a short series with for fellow Perspective Checks interviewee Clark Rowanson, C.R. Rowanson's debut novel Spawn Point. For the first book of The New Eternity, we played a short series in that game world with a RPG system that Clark had homebrewed to work for his lit RPG series, which I am reading right now. I'm almost done with the first book, and I'm going to be starting the second book soon. Very entertaining. Go check out Spawn Point and New Eternity by C.R. Rowanson. Very entertaining lit RPG if you need to scratch that itch, if you've fallen into that genre like I have. I will be talking with Ian about homebrew at the table and homebrewing games for your games and how homebrew is itself design. Then we are going to have a Valentine's one-shot, as we always do. This is going to be, is this the 3rd Valentine's Day one-shot that I've done? I believe it is, with my wife Lynn. We are going to be doing the other one-on-one Does Love Forgive scenario for Call of Cthulhu for this Valentine's Day one-shot, which is very exciting. Everyone liked her Valentine's Day Call of Cthulhu one-shot. Obviously, we love our Star-Crossed one as well, but I know a bunch of people from the DMs After Dark Discord were very excited that we're playing this Call of Cthulhu one again, so that's exciting. And then the 4th week of the month is going to be my second design diaries, discussing my upcoming in one way or another, biggest project I've ever made, along with my friend Christian from the DMs After Dark, for Gardens of Rust, our post-catastrophe survival and community rebuilding game. In the second episode for this, I will be creating a character so you can hear how character creation is done. And I think we might start doing a little solo AP mini series within these design diaries, just to give people an idea of how this game is going to play and feel at the table. And I think that's it. Oh, and I am streaming on Twitch now. So the last Monday of the month, if you got nothing going on, come log on to Twitch and hang out with me in chat. We will be doing a bunch of segments. We're feeling it out and it's going to get better over time. But this is where Mining Media is now. So if you miss Mining Media, now's the time to grab The Black Company by Glenn Cook, which is a dark military fantasy book, and there is an RPG coming out for it made by Arc Dream, who make Delta Green. So if you want dark and gritty, they are certainly the company and publishers to do so. So we'll be reading the first book, which is The Black Company by Glenn Cook, and we'll be reading that to talk about it on Mining Media during the Twitch stream this month, which is February 23rd. Oof, announcements are getting long. Let's get back to some Colossal and see what's at the heart of Castle Revolving. Okay. Well, if you listen to that intro, you know that I just summarized what was probably easily an hour of actually playing Colossal into about 7 minutes for that intro, because if you listen to my first Twitch stream, I talked a little bit about behind the scenes of how I'm playing Colossal for solo and for podcast, and I'm going to be doing that in the Twitch streams ongoing. I'll be talking behind the scenes stuff about the game that I'm playing and talking about how it feels and the difference between playing it solo if I were just journaling or however it's intended to be played versus doing it as an audio medium for podcast, which is entertainment. But Castle Revolving is brutal, and not in a bad way. I think that it's actually a really challenging, really awesome, like mega dungeon for Colossal, which is not a game that relies heavily on resource attrition and combat heaviness and stuff like that. Like, I feel like it follows a pretty loose loop, and this forces you to like really be ready. But I also feel like I probably didn't do it as well as I could have the first time a couple episodes ago, adapting it to audio, because I tend to play stream of consciousness. So when I was getting ready to do this episode, I played the last phase, which ended up involving 3 revolutions of the castle, because I kept hitting kings before 8 black cards, and I summarized it in a montage as Sybil waypointed back into the Castle Revolving and made her way to the center of the castle. It's brutal. It's a lot of flipping cards and getting through a lot of challenges. Luckily, the exploration table does not have like requirements for all of the narrative obstacles that come your way in Castle Revolving. Otherwise, I don't know if you could ever have enough resources to make this happen. But we managed to get 4 waypoints, and that means that we have found the way to the final chamber of the Colossal. Anybody listening, if you've done this and you've gotten to 6 or 10 waypoints, please tell me how you managed to do that. That is dedication. But here we are, Sybil, her little ice rookling friend, Zorn, and the Rookrot rookling all stroll in to the center. I imagine it almost like these 4 waypoints are all lit up, and then when there's enough of them activated, maybe it even like just creates hallways from these 4 waypoint stones directly to the center of the Castle Revolving, and the rest of the castle can revolve, and it will revolve around these, but because 4 have been activated, there's always like bridges straight to the central room. And I imagine Sybil is walking in this hallway, and maybe she can even see cubes upon cubes upon cubes, and how enormous this sandstone castle is, this cube of Castle Revolving. all of the enormous walls from the inside, and then they're made up of smaller cubes that are all over the place, stacked around, and they move all the time, all around, and she's like seeing the inside of an enormous, constantly spinning, revolving cube. And then in the very center of that is just like a platform with the very central chamber. She hefts her spear in her hands. The Rooklings are all ready to go. Zorn has his shield and sword out, and they approach cautiously, because every labyrinth we've been in has a guardian at the center. They walk in, and something feels off. Sybil looks around and just sees plain sandstone walls. There's no enormous beast waiting here. And then Sybil starts thinking to herself about the contraptions and the puzzles she's made. All of the bastions in here, the rooks that were in Castle Revolving, and the fact that bastions are thought to have been the equivalent of rooklings to colossal rooks. And she thinks to herself, maybe that was the point. The hard part was getting here. Her head is spinning with so many theories, and she's running her hands along every wall, feeling around for pressure plates or something to open a door, when her little ice rookling friend kind of waves her over and just points, and there is a small sandstone chest just sitting in the center of the room. It blends in so well she didn't even see it. And as the group approach it, they slide the heavy lid to the side, and it falls to the floor with a boom. It cracks this soft sandstone. And inside, they see a small, sleeping rookling. But it's unlike any rookling Sybil has ever seen. I think that the two rooklings are also very confused. This rookling looks like a miniature version of the entire labyrinth as we saw it from the outside, waiting for a wall to turn and a door to enter. It is a segmented cube, and all of those little segments are twisting around as it is sleeping. But one of the sides has a few like circles and lines that give it a little face. As the group is looking at it, it begins to wake up and spin faster, and it just floats up out of the chest and is floating at about chest height for Sybil, and her eyes go wide and she looks at it and says, "Oh my good, you can fly?" It begins spinning and rotating constantly, never in one position for more than maybe even half a second. And Sybil looks at it and just looks down at her rookling friend, and then looks over at the rookrot rookling and looks over at Zorn and just goes, "Another rookling? You have to be kidding me." And Zorn says, "Well, another rookling. Do you mind?" And Sybil just shakes her head and starts looking around for... You can hear her mumbling in the back, just going like, "Please tell me there's something else here. Please tell me I did not come back here for a rookling. I did not. I am not a babysitter." And Zorn steps forward and says, "Excuse me, Awakened One, do you feel a pull? Do you know where we may find a Rookling Forge?" And I'm going to flip a card on the Oracle. The Jack of Clubs. Black cards are yeses, and high cards are yes, and there's a bonus. So what could that mean? Ooh, interesting. I love this. As Zorn sees Sybil kind of pacing around, frustrated, he turns and looks at her and says, "Sybil, this one knows where the Rookling Forge is." And Sybil turns her head quickly and looks at Zorn. "Truly? Oh, well, that's actually very good. That saves us a lot of hopelessly wandering through here. Does it happen to know how to get out of this castle? Or please don't tell me we have to find our way out." And the little rookling if it could be said that it smiles, it spins a little bit, its eyes lighting up, and then the entire castle itself begins revolving. Those hallways from the waypoint stones crumble away or start reorienting themselves, and suddenly there is just a staircase down from the center of this massive major labyrinth that leads right out to a door. And Sybil says, "Please tell me you can do that everywhere." And it makes a sound that immediately Sybil goes, "I'm gonna assume that's a no." Alright, well, lead the way. And we are going to do some exploration through the dungeons to find the way to a Rookling Forge. Now, just as a reminder, we didn't find a Rookling Forge the first time we specifically went out looking for it. And I believe we need to do 2 more phases. Yes, I just checked my notes. 2 more phases before we can find it. So this episode will be 2 exploration phases that will ideally lead us to the Rookling Forge for next episode, which may be finale worthy or maybe penultimate. We will see. Alright, so a reminder, we are down 1 wound that I did take. Oh, I took it to combat, so we're good. We are down 1 wound, and our exploration score is a 3. So we are just going to flip 3 cards to explore the dungeons outside of Castle Revolving and resolve those prompts. We may run into labyrinths and things like that. We do know of 2 labyrinths where there may be things that we can do for leaders of the clans and whatnot. But until we know what we get, let's just go ahead and flip 3 cards for our first exploration phase outside of Castle Revolving. We get a 6 of clubs, an 8 of diamonds, and a 7 of clubs. Okay. As a reminder, black cards are scenic things like structures and objects in the dungeon, and red cards are organic things like people and creatures. So our 6 of clubs says a spectral rook attack. Ooh, and that's interesting because will it actually attack us with our Whisperstone? That'll be interesting. The 7 of clubs, the 7, is a gate where you can meditate and recharge your spirit stat, which we are not using because that is from the Kyodana books, and I don't have that one physical. I have the PDFs, but I have never played Kyodana, so we're not using that, but it will just be a nice scenic thing. And then the 8 of hearts says we find a settlement in the dungeons. Ooh, you come across a small settlement, maybe attached to a column like a treehouse or hanging from the ceiling like a huge stalactite. It is safe because it is hearts as opposed to diamonds, which would say draw an event card. Okay. This already seems to me like I know exactly how this is going to go. So we see the group being led-ish by this new Rookling Revolving, as it is attempting to find its way through the dungeons towards this Rookling Forge. And I think that there's a few times where we actually see it stop before like a dead end or just a wall, a cavern wall, and it begins spinning very intensely, and Sybil or Zorn or one of the Rooklings has to remind this tiny little revolving Rookling now that, hey, you don't control these just random walls in the dungeon. Sorry, bud. And eventually we are trying to find our way. I mean, the Ice Rookling does feel the pull. This Rookling Revolving does seem to know the way, or so it suggested, except it's the same kind of deal, right? It knows the direction, but there's not a straight road to that direction. So eventually, Sybil and the crew come to a gate. And it's one of these gates like the ones that can recharge your spirit. And I think it would recharge spirit because it is indicative of a settlement. And this settlement is, I don't want it to be a treehouse. I don't want it to be hanging from a stalactite because that is oubliette in a nutshell. I think this one is actually, it's built along like a natural bridge arch through an enormous cavern. And so all of the buildings are either on the sides of this natural bridge, this stone bridge, or on top of it. And they've definitely built scaffolding to like keep it upright and enough weight will not, risk collapse. So we're going to say that it is across a bridge. And so there's gates on either side. And these gates, as soon as you pass them, it feels safe, right? It just feels safe here because you can protect yourself from anything coming across the bridge from either side. There's a good gap between where it outlets from, a cave tunnel or something like that into the cavern before the settlement itself begins on both sides so they can defend it if they need to. And as Sybil and the crew approach and get into the town, they are welcomed. It is simple. We are going to, instead of, restoring our spirit, I'm just going to put that 1 point back in our combat and say that, we share a meal with these people, and there is a spectral rook that wanders out onto the bridge, and it makes everyone incredibly nervous. And I think that Zorn and the Rookling and Sybil all share a look, and Sybil looks determined and says, "You're not stopping me. If I can try, if it works, I'm going out there." And Zorn and the Rooklings all nod and follow. I think Rookling Revolving has no idea what's going on, but follows just because. And Sybil walks out to meet the spectral rook on the bridge, holds up the whisper stone that hangs around her neck and her spear in her hand, and she just begins talking. The spectral rook stops, but it does appear to be looking around her as well, like maybe it's trying to look into this settlement for something specific. And for the first time, we kind of see, because of where it is in this enormous cavern, the direction that these chains are connected to the spectral rook and what direction they're heading towards in the dungeons. Sybil looks at her two friends and the other Rooklings, and she says, "I'm going to try something." And she's going to activate her new phase stone, the one that she got in the labyrinth, where she was led by the whisper stone. And she's going to phase into the same space, whatever that means, occupying the same non-physical space as this spectral rook. And she is going to attempt to walk towards it and just hold her hand out. Let's flip a card to see if it works. That is a King of Diamonds. So that is a no, but there is an upside. Sybil can't interact physically with this spectral rook even when she is using her phase stone, but there's an upside to it. Let's just flip on the twist table for the story generator oracles and see what we get. An Ace of Hearts. Ooh, Ace for the twist says betrayal. Sybil attempts to touch while phased, and I think that as soon as she touches the rook at all, she unphases back to physical space, where her friends rush forward to make sure she's okay. But she gets a vision of rooks in a way that no human has likely ever understood them, because they've, as long as anyone can remember in the Colossal, in the Roomlands, they do not show any kind of advanced cognitive abilities to communicate. They have no reason to attack, that seems logical to the people of the Roomlands. There are so many questions about them, about why they do what they do, about how they interact with one another, about if they have any sort of society or anything like that. And the overwhelming feeling that Sybil gets from this brief interaction in the phased reality, in the spectral space, is that these chained Rooklings have been betrayed. Interesting. And obviously the settlement folks here are incredibly thankful here in the Bridge City, or the Bridge Settlement, whatever you want to call this. And they are incredibly grateful that Sybil not only walked out crazily towards a spectral rook alone or with a few friends, but that she settled the issue without fighting it, without any kind of conflict. It just seemed to fade away in the direction of the chains. So we'll say that we're healed up to full. we have enough gear and stuff like that, although there's plenty of cool stuff I guess we could talk about. Maybe I'll go to the original book. Just look at something maybe that the merchant has. Ooh, this sounds fun for Sybil. An extending pole. A telescopic pole made from rook parts allows you to vault upward and also attack from a distance. I kind of love that, and I think that maybe they give it to her for her arm. So now her arm has a new way of, instead of being bent so that way it's up over her shoulder like a third hand or arm or tool that she used in her rooksmith days or for her tinkering, what she can do is she can turn it so it's pointing straight down from her back and use this telescoping pole to just launch herself upward. So we'll write that down. That seems like a fun, reasonable treasure for settling this spectral rook conflict for these people. And we will do our second exploration phase as we leave the bridge settlement. How fun. We get a Queen of Hearts, an Ace of Diamonds, and a 7 of Spades. Consulting the exploration tables, a queen, a jack queen, or king is always Lycan Rook attack. So we're going to have a medium Lycan Rook attack with that. But the Ace of Diamonds says a stranger is free and wandering, just like you. So that's fun. And then the 7 of Spades, we actually know what that is. We got a 7 of Clubs last time. A black 7 is a gate where we meditate and recharge our spirit. We'll just say this is the gate out of the city. So there's the first one. And then we will deal with a Lycan Rook and a wandering NPC. The obvious thing here is to say that the wandering NPC is going to be attacked by the Lycan Rook, but I feel like we've done that like 2 or 3 times now. So I think instead what we'll do is we will go up against the Lycan Rook and then find somebody at the next kind of crossroads. And then we will try again to see if we can find our Rookling Forge. First though, we need to fight a medium Lycan Rook, which, to be completely honest, I am very confident in overcoming because Sybil is a beast compared to Marco and Berger from my first series. Oh my gosh, I feel like Sybil could take on just about anything, but I've said that before and I've gotten whooped. So let's see, we'll flip our 3 cards for the conflict, and then we will flip 3 cards one at a time for this Lycan Rook. We also have like 4 people. Oh, should we use our advanced combat rules? Yes, we should. We're going to flip 8 cards for us instead of 4, and then we will flip 6 cards for the Lycan Rook, and we'll have a little bit more fun using our new advanced combat rules. So our 8 cards, whoa, this is crazy, are gonna be, a 2 of Spades, a 3 of Spades, a 2 of Diamonds, oh no guys, a 10 of Diamonds, a Queen of Spades, that's more like it, a 4 of Diamonds, oh my gosh, a King of Hearts, and a Queen of Diamonds. Okay, I'm just going to separate these out. We have 4 good cards and 4 very not good cards. But we have some new techniques that may make this a little more doable for us. Alright, now there's going to be 6 cards. I will just separate out 6 cards right now for our enemy Lycan Rook. And now we can do this combat as usual. Now I just checked the rules. We don't have to use the abilities from our 2 approaches, which I will go over again real quick. We have Trip and Trap, which is a combat approach, which is obviously revolving around making the enemy fall into our traps, like leading them to make mistakes, and then we capitalize on their foolish behavior falling for our traps. And then we also have Stonewall Defense, which is just all about blocking attacks and using the enemy's strength against them. Okay? And these cards have abilities based on the suits. So if we want to, we can use a card and an approach, and the suit for that card will matter whatnot. So here goes. The first card we are up against from this medium Lycan Rook is, a 3 of Clubs. Okay, so that's a very low card that we can beat with even some of our bad cards. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to be using our Trip and Trap ability. We are wandering the dungeons when a Lycan Rook, I think this Lycan Rook, just for fun, is an enormous boulder. It is just a huge lichen-covered boulder of a rook that when it stands up, it almost sways from just being so bulky. We can see crenellations and, the bits of rook rot that have, or lichen that have pervaded its many, many seams, but it actually gets around better at this point now, rolling, than it does on its feet. And we're going to use our 2 of diamonds, which I know you're going to that sounds crazy, Rene, because that doesn't beat a 3 of clubs. However, if we use our trip and trap ability, which says, if you have a winning diamond in hand, which we do, we have 2 winning diamonds in hand, what we can do is look at the top card of the deck. If any cards are in my hand that match that suit, then we get +4 to this card. If we don't, we get -4. So the only suit we'd have to flip right now to not win is a club. And it's a club. Rene, why would you do this? Why would you try something stupid? Well, that's what I get. Sounds like we're taking a wound. I think Sybil is very confident. I just went into this very confident. I was like, oh, I'm going to beat this thing, no problem. And Sybil does the same thing where she says, it's rolling. All right, guide it over here. It's not going to be able to go anywhere. And she leads it towards like a dead end. And thinking that it's just going to crash into this wall, she'd be able to capitalize on this, except instead it actually rolls like up the wall, and now all of a sudden it's above her and it just comes down in an enormous slam, and she has to dive out of the way, and she lands funny on her hip, and she kind of winces and she says, okay, never mind, let's just do this the old way. And we're going to flip the next card for it, which is a 6 of hearts. No more messing around. What we're going to do is we're actually going to use our 10 of diamonds. We are literally just going to beat this card like this. This is a creative attack. Sybil is down here. It has just landed next to her. And I think that instead, maybe we actually see, because 10 of diamonds is a creative attack. I think that maybe we see the first bits of ability that Rookling Revolving has. And as it comes forward, it actually starts spinning itself, and it can change certain stones within another rook if it concentrates enough. It's trying really, really hard, and it doesn't do a lot of damage, but it's doing enough that it's actually like creating a bunch of weird, just jutting out stones on this otherwise what has become very circular because of all of its rolling. It has like worn away all of the jutting bits and stuff like that would make it not roll as well, but Rookling Revolving is actually creating all of these, so now it's not going to roll anywhere near as well. Alright, next card is a 4 of hearts. Wow, well, we're up against a bunch of low cards. Let's see if there's any other good ideas from our low cards that we might be able to make work here. Actually, this sounds perfect to what we were just describing. I'm going to not use my King of Hearts, but I'm going to use the ability from Trip and Trap called Destabilize, which says, if you have a winning heart card in hand, which we do with our king, we can instead choose 2 cards in hand that share a suit, our 2 and our 3 of spades, and use that to overcome this enemy card regardless of its number. And so we are destabilizing this thing using Rookling Revolving, who is pulling a bunch of its stones out of place on this strange Lichen Rook, and then maybe our Rookrot Rookling is using their abilities to manipulate this Lichen to kind of like unattach a bunch of the Lichen that's holding it together. And this thing starts actually like falling apart. It has 3 cards left, and we have 4 cards left. Its next card is, oh my goodness, a 2 of clubs. We could beat that with anything. That's pretty awesome. Alright, well, I think that there's almost no reason not to use something special if we can. We will use our Stonewall Defense, because its clubs is a weapon attack, which I don't know what we would use for this Lichen. I guess it would be Lichen. And instead, we are going to counter with our Queen of Spades, which, using our Stonewall Defense, says, if this card is 3 or more greater than the enemy's card, remove a card from their stack. So we'll just remove the next card. We'll get rid of what would have been a 5 of hearts. And it says unshakable. So we attempt to do this, but Sybil is already infected with Rookrot, and her arm just kind of like catches whatever this magic is and just crumbles it. It just breaks it, and a bunch of this Lichen crumbles as this huge Lichen Rook is beginning to like backpedal, try and start like rolling backwards away, but now all these weird new like bumps and out of place rocks on its back are making it not be able to go where it wants to go. And it's down to its last card, which is a 9 of clubs, another weapon attack, but we can use any of our cards to defeat this. And to be honest, none of the approaches really seem great, so we are just going to beat it with our Queen of Diamonds, which is a creative attack. And I think that we're just going to use all 3 of our Rooklings to just wail on this Lichen Rook. And I think that Sybil and Zorn stand kind of shoulder to shoulder, looking at the Rooklings going absolutely wild on this Lichen Rook. And they look like simultaneously proud and maybe a little embarrassed parents that their kids are so crazy. But they smile at one another and just say, well, we've got quite the strange group, don't we? And Zorn says, still dislike Rooklings? And Sybil shrugs her shoulders. She says, I don't know about dislike. Okay, maybe I'm growing a little fond of them. And Zorn just smirks if he can smirk and says, it's a start. And we'll just keep wandering on, and we will meet an NPC before we attempt to find our next Rookling Forge. Attempt to find it with the next attempt, which again, I will go over how to do that, but first, let's flip for an NPC. Flipping 3 cards for an NPC generator, we get 10 of spades, 5 of spades, 8 of spades, which I feel like should matter, but it doesn't. Combining this in an interesting way, I'm going to slightly riff on the name, and we are going to find a big, dominating, intimidating man named Eris. And Eris, I think, you know what? We're just going to find Eris sitting under a underground waterfall, like a seepage bit from the stone where water is flowing out, and maybe it's a little bit more water than just a usual trickle, and they're just sitting underneath it. They are big and muscular and just kind of like brawny, and they're just sitting underneath it with their eyes closed, meditating. And our crew comes across him. One of the Rooklings, it's definitely our ice Rookling, walks over and just kind of like nudges Eris's shoulder. He kind of, whoa! He looks over at the whole group and he says, What are you doing here? And he stands up, and as he stands up, we underestimated how tall he is. He actually has to kind of like duck to not hit the top of the tunnel where we are. And Sybil looks at him suspiciously and says, what are you doing way out here? It's dangerous. And he says, this is where I meditate. What do you mean? Where do you come from? And he says, oh, right. There's a settlement. He describes to us where he's from, but I don't think they are in any kind of danger. And we're just going to ask him, we're heading towards a Rookling Forge. Do you happen to know if there's one near here? And he will say, according to the Oracle, Jack of Spades. Wow, a 4th spades in a row. That's crazy. And a black card that is a face card is yes, with a bonus. He knows exactly where it is, and we are not far off. Now, we have 2 characters, the Rookling Revolving and now Eris, who know where this is. So, as a refresher, to find a Rookling Forge, we need to draw a card. Then we decide if the next card is going to be greater than or lower in value than the card we just drew. If we get this right, 4 cards in a row, we follow the trail and find a Rookling Forge. We have 2 people who've pretty confidently said they know where this is. I'm going to say that we get to mess up once, and as long as we do it with 1 error or less, then we find this Rookling Forge. Let's find out. First card, oh, that's not an easy one. That is the 9 of spades. I'm going to say the next card is going to be lower. It is an ace of clubs. Now, in Colossal, ace is pretty much always low. So that is a correct answer. Not like a lot of other card games where aces are high. And that is a guarantee that the next card is going to be higher, which is the jack. So I'm going to say the next card is going to be lower, and it is a 5, and we have successfully reached our first Rookling Forge. And that's what we'll do next time. Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Colossal Dungeons here on the Rene Plays Games podcast. I hope that you are enjoying it. I am loving my return to Colossal. One of the first solo games I ever played, and it holds a special place in my heart. The art is so fantastic. Actually, I showed it off on stream, but I also recently received my Kickstarter physical version of Rookling Heroes, the 2-player card game that Nick Angel has put out, which is inspired obviously by Colossal. The art style is so adorable. You play as little Rooklings on either side of a battlefield, and you get to empower them to do fun, cool things. It looks adorable. Check that out too if you maybe aren't a solo TTRPG player. If you're not a solo TTRPG player but you listen to my podcast, thank you so much. That's crazy. But if you like card games, maybe check that one out. It's still the first release that he's made for this, but I believe the goal is that he's going to do a lot more with it. In fact, I think there was maybe even a video game or something like that. I don't know. Check out Nick's Patreon. He's very busy and very creative. It's cool. If you like what I'm doing, you can find me on the social medias at Rene Plays Games Pod, most places, or Rene Plays Games. You can email me directly at reneplaysgamespod@gmail.com. If you want to be on an episode of Perspective Checks, reach out to me now. I've been doing a lot of reaching out to folks, but I would love to talk to as many people as I can. That's the whole point of Perspective Checks, is more perspectives, rate and review, all that stuff. And I have a coffee, which I'm trying to do better about posting stuff on and figuring out a way to incentivize something. So if you've ever donated money to me on coffee and you have an idea for what might be something that I can give to folks over there who've donated or want to donate, that is bonus, throw it out there. Email me. If you ever give me money on coffee and you don't already have Mech or any of my games that cost money, let me know. I'll give you one. That seems totally fair, and or other stuff. I'll send you some stickers. Whatever. Just, yeah. Again, no pressure. Just a thing. And yeah, until next time, try and meet people on their plane of understanding and settle conflicts non-confrontationally. Wild idea.